Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast, episode 24.
Welcome to the Out of Order Podcast, your window into the firearms community, exploring those shaping the future of our rights and protecting our lifestyle, laws, legal cases, activism, and self-defense in a candid and honest podcast for our brothers and sisters in arms. Here's your host, James Kalita.
Thank you for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Today's sponsor is Audible. Head over to outoforderjameskalita.com/books and you will find a link where you can get 2 free audiobooks from audible.com. We've mentioned over 30 books on this podcast, and many of them are available free when you subscribe to Audible. Today's guest is Charlie Cook. Charlie is a musician, music teacher, firearms owner, and podcaster. He's the host of Riding Shotgun with Charlie. And now, here's Charlie Cook. Charlie Cook, welcome to the show.
James, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be on with you. We're doing like a 2-for-1 deal here.
Yeah.
So, rock on.
Yeah, so we're driving out of New York City. And, if I haven't told you before, I advise everyone listening not to come to New York City or New Jersey.
Or New Jersey, right. So I pick them up in Jersey and we drive to New York City.
Right, yeah. So Charlie, you do Riding Shotgun with Charlie. Would you tell us a bit about that?
Absolutely. Riding Shotgun with Charlie is, of course, the stolen idea, I guess, from the Carpool Karaoke, which was stolen from Seinfeld's Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Okay.
And that's totally how I had this idea. I drive a lot for my work. I'm a teacher, and I go from school to school in a big area. So driving is something I do often, and I've discovered that at one point my son would open up and talk to me a little bit more when we were in the car, and he didn't have to look at me. So we could talk easily that way. So I'm like, you know what? I listen to a lot of podcasts. So I said, I'm going to start a podcast where I'm driving people around and talking about guns. And I'm going to be driving, and they're going to be sitting in the passenger seat. They're going to be riding shotgun. So that's totally how I came up with the idea and the name.
Awesome. And it works, because I did find I started just going off on tangents, and I don't talk much. I'm the quiet one. That's why I started an interview podcast, because I'm like, I'll ask a question, they'll talk the rest of the time. Yeah.
They're 18 minutes later. Yeah. So it was nice talking with you. Yeah. That's cool, man.
Cool. So, you've interviewed some pretty amazing people.
I have, you know what, I love telling my story because it reaffirms that I must have done something right someplace. So I had the idea for Riding Shotgun with Charlie, and my thinking was really limited. Like, all right, I can interview. I spent 10 years playing in a Motown disco funk band, so I could interview my musician buddies. I'm a gun instructor in Massachusetts. I could interview my Massachusetts gun instructor buddies, and that'll be like it. And then I found out that one of the girls that I was friends with back in my early 20s, her husband's a radio guy in Minneapolis, and I didn't know this, but she's like, oh, he's a gun guy, and I found out the reason he's a gun guy is because he was robbed at gunpoint.
Oh,
yes, for $20 in his wallet, and they decided to, literally, he took me to the house when I interviewed him. These guys were going to shoot him in the back of the head for $20, and they're like, hey, if we get him to an ATM, we give him money. So he did that. He was able to escape, thank God, and continue on with his life. And he's much more pro-gun than he was now, or then. Anyway, his story ended up, I realized I could go out and interview him in Minneapolis, right, make a weekend of it. So I made plans for that, and I said, hey, I want to interview you for my little thing that I have going on. His name is Lee Michaels. Lee actually used to sit in for Mark Walters on Armed American Radio.
Oh.
And Lee's story is in Mark's book called Lessons from Unarmed America that Mark Walters did with Rob Pincus. So Lee said, hey, if you come out on this particular weekend, it's the Minnesota State Fair. Mark Walters from Armed American Radio comes up. You can interview him. I'm like, wow, that's big time. So I went out to Minneapolis for a weekend. I interviewed Mark. I interviewed Lee. And I interviewed Peter Johnson from Archway Defense. and it was totally cool. And Mark had me on his radio show that night, and I actually got to talk to Paul Lathrop that night, which is pretty wild. It's interesting how everything interlaces.
Yeah.
So the next day, Mark called me. He's like, "Hey, man, this riding shotgun thing is it's a totally kick-ass idea. If there's anything I can do to help you out, we'll see what I can do." I'm like, "Awesome, that sounds great." And then he called me 2 days later, and he said, "Hey, do you want to speak at the Gun Rights Policy Conference?" I'm like, "Yes, I do." So I went down to Tampa and spoke at the GRPC and met a ton of other people that way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you started out life as a musician. And,
Yes, my game plan in life was to be the lead trombone player for Kiss.
Right.
But Kiss doesn't have a trombone player, so that's a problem.
Yeah.
I went to college to be a band teacher. I wanted to be, like I said, I wanted to. All right, I gotta get out of this dude's way. I wanted to be a rock star, but chubby guys that play the trombone don't get to be rock stars. So I've been a band teacher for 25 years. The other thing that ended up that I don't want to say I'm known for, but the other thing that I do is I make videos where I play the trumpet and shoot a gun at the same time.
Okay.
And I had this idea. I was talking with a friend of mine. We were having a couple of drinks, and he's like, "Hey, what'd be funny is if you played the Blue Danube. You played bum ba da da da."
All right.
I'm like, "That's ridiculous." So then I went home and worked on one-handed reloading, and I got the music for the Blue Danube and figured out, timed everything out and when do I change magazines and stuff. And I went out and I filmed that in 2014, and that was pretty cool. I put that up on my Facebook and YouTube and social media. And then the following May, I did Happy Birthday for one of my friend's son's birthday, and I played the trumpet and shot an AR. And that was pretty cool. So I went out and I did that. As a parent, I hate it when you take your kids to a birthday party and the kids would sing Happy Birthday and they would say cha 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 at the end of every line. I hate that. I hate it musically. I hate it as a parent. I think it sounds stupid. I think it sounds ridiculous. So I figured what I would do is I would play Happy Birthday on the trumpet and I would shoot the cha cha cha.
Nice.
And I did this with a trumpet and AR. And I put it on YouTube and shared it on my social media. And then I had some friends contact me and say, "Hey, my birthday's coming up. Could you do one of those videos for me?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I, do another Happy Birthday song. And another friend of mine had a wedding coming up, so I did like the trumpet voluntary. And it just, TV themes, patriotic tunes, just kind of took off. And I ended up on a television show called Right This Minute. They asked if they could use a couple videos. To which, of course, I said yes. And I got phone calls from a guy. Right after that, I got phone calls from a show in Jacksonville, Florida. Before that, I did one of my nieces. I grew up outside Chicago. And one of my nieces is a Blackhawks fan. So I did the song the Blackhawks play when they score a goal. And I have a friend of mine who's a hockey guy. And I brought his Blackhawks jersey. And I shared this. And somehow some radio stations in Chicago found it. I'm getting phone calls from radio stations in Chicago, and they're like, "Hey, are you the guy that plays the trumpet? Did you that song with the the Blackhawks tune?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's me." And I tell them I'm from Illinois, so they got a cool little connection there. And that was all cool and all great. And then when I spoke at the Gun Rights Policy Conference, Andrew Gottlieb asked if they could use a couple of gungrams in October. So I had a gungram of the Munsters theme and of the Addams Family.
Nice.
So I played ba 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 ba, which was pretty funny. Like literally within a week, the Addams Family got like 1 million views on their Facebook page, which was really cool.
Yeah.
Then a friend of mine who's an anti-gun person was up late. She said she couldn't sleep and she was watching television and she found Comedy Central, and she was on some show that called At Midnight with James. Oh my gosh, what's his name? With Chris Hardwick. And so she sent me a Facebook message at 2:30 in the morning, and she's like, "Oh my God, I just saw you on television." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I just saw you playing the trumpet and shooting a gun." I'm like, "Oh my God!" So I looked it up the next day, and lo and behold, they used the Addams Family gun theme and the Mario theme gun Gungram. I call them Gungrams. They use that as like a little game show that they have. And, you know, like more people have started watching these and subscribing to my YouTube channel and stuff. And I'm a teacher. I'm a band teacher. So I went into school like that day. My video, the Mario Gungram, ended up like on 27 of the YouTube trending videos.
Wow.
Yeah. So literally, I'm having a band lesson in the little rinky-dink town in New England, and this kid comes up to me. These kids come up and are like, "Hey, Mr. Cook, we saw your YouTube channel." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" I'm like, "Oh, we saw you playing the trumpet, shooting a gun." I'm like, "No, I don't. That's crazy. That seems dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about." So it's, you know, they're like, "No, it was definitely you." And I'm like, "All right, don't tell the second grade teacher because she's not a gun person." So that was pretty cool. I've had a couple kids discover what I do.
Okay.
I don't hide it from the company that I work for. So I don't hide it, but I certainly don't flaunt it either.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's given me something to be part of the gun community. You know, I've done videos for I did one for Beth Alcazar for her birthday recently. I emceed a concealed carry fashion show with Amanda Suffolcool and her brother Rob Campbell. And so they have a radio show and a podcast or a couple radio shows. And so I did the theme song from their show for them, which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Since I was going to Cleveland, I did the Cleveland Rocks from the Drew Carey show. So this, you know, it's all fun, man. I want to bring fun ownership to gun ownership.
Nice.
And have a good time with it.
So, entertainment people tend to be very, well, at least the way we see them, anti-gun. So how, as a musician, how are people in your circle about you being a firearms owner?
So, some of the people that I teach with are completely against it, which is cool. Cool for them. I try not to bring it up at work stuff. I do think it's interesting that they think me carrying a pocket knife is dangerous, but one of the other instructors that carries a pocket knife, he's using it to, you know, repair saxophones. And I'm like, well, that's what I do too. Yeah. Yep. But I noticed this. I remember before I even got into the gun stuff, I became an NRA member before I even fired a gun. I got a magazine subscription to some hunting magazine subscription as a the fundraiser for one of my nephews, and they put me on the mailing list as a hunter for the NRA. So then I started getting things from the NRA. It says, "Hey, tell the anti-gun folk to stick it," and I said, "Yeah, that's cool." So I got I became an NRA member. I got my president is Charlton Heston bumper sticker.
Nice.
And card-carrying NRA member, never fired a gun. And I remember sitting in a nightclub in Boston and talking with one of the guys, and I said, "Hey, you know, this gun stuff is pretty interesting and pretty cool. I think I want to get into it." And he's like, "Oh, guns are dangerous and blah blah blah." And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't think so, man." He's like, "No, it's not good. You shouldn't do this." And I said, "Listen, you like to go home from a gig and smoke a joint, right?" He's like, "Oh, of course. You know, I sit and watch a little TV, play some video games." And I'm like, "I'm not into it, man. And I'm not going to tell you not to smoke pot. But I'm not going to tell you not to have a gun if you don't want one. I want to have one. I want to have a gun. I don't want to smoke pot. You want to smoke pot and not have a gun. You're going to inflict your will on me, but I'm not going to inflict my will on you. That's ridiculous."
Right.
And that's just kind of how I've been about it. I'm like, "You do, knock yourself out.
Yeah.
You do what you want to do with it. I'm going to do what I want to do with it. You know, you leave me alone. I'm going to leave you alone."
Nice.
Yeah.
So I did not know that was a demographic, people that belonged to the NRA and didn't own guns. How'd that, well, you told us how that happened, but how'd you end up getting into guns?
What happened was September 11th. I was teaching in a public school. And that was picture day. I don't know why it was picture day, but I remember it being picture day. And they used my classroom where they took the pictures. So I spent the whole day watching everything unfold on TV. After that, the principal called us in. We had a meeting, and he said, "Listen, if anyone gets in the school that's not supposed to be here," so before they started calling it active shooters, it's like, if anyone gets in the school that's not supposed to be here, he's like, I'm going to get on the intercom and I'm going to say the eagle has landed, and that means that everyone should lock the door and hide. And my son was 9 months old, and I'm like, that seems unacceptable. So I sat in the room, and I was 30. I was not a gun guy. I was relatively new to really paying attention to politics, or starting to pay attention to politics. And I sat in a room with a bunch of teachers who I didn't quite realize were liberal Democrats. And I said, if the teachers on the first floor all had guns, they could shoot the bad guy. The teachers on the second floor can keep on teaching. We need half the grief counseling. And they looked at me. Yeah, they looked at me like I was nuts. So when the next school vacation that came up, I'm like, I'm gonna go get a gun license. I'm gonna show you guys what it's about.
Right. Yeah.
And I got a gun license. Never fired a gun before. And then about 4 or 5 months later, I took a class where I got to do some shooting, and I'm like, whoa. Does anyone know about this? This shooting thing? This is really pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then after that, I still didn't have any guns. I inherited some guns that were my father's, and then I got into it, man. I joined a club, I joined a shooting range, and most of the clubs in Massachusetts are all private clubs, so you have to be a member of a range if you want to go shooting someplace. I got into it, man. I thought it was a lot of fun. And then a couple years after that, I got into... We got to figure out where we're going. Okay. A couple years after that, I started volunteering time with the state's pro-gun organization. Being a teacher already, I started. They asked if I wanted to help teach some classes that they have. They call them FSET, Firearms Safety Education Day, and then I want to start teaching. So I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll come down. You get to hang out with some gun folks. You get to shoot some guns if you're lucky. They have some extra ammo.
Yeah.
Cool, let's do it. So I did that, and then after a couple years of putting some time in, one of the director of education said to me, he's like, hey, you should become an instructor. I'm like, oh, how do I do that? So he's like, well, you got to take a class, and I got certified through the NRA and through the Massachusetts State Police. And then from that, I started I had, 7 people I'd teach a year, because I didn't know anything about having a business or marketing, or not that I knew anything more about either of those, but I didn't know anything back then. I knew even less. So what I ended up doing is getting some business cards printed up and trying to hand them out to people and interact with more people. And life got really tough for me at one point, so I went to a shooting school in the area and asked if they needed any instructors, and they hired me. And I taught there for a couple of years, and I thought it was cool because you get to make a little bit of money and still get up and be in front of people and teach and all that. I eventually realized after watching a class of 20 people that they all paid $100 to the shooting school. I'm like, dude, there's 20 people. I just brought in $2,000 for the boss, and he pays me $150 or something. Oh, like, right? How do I make $2,000?
Right.
So then another friend of mine encouraged me to talk to someone about starting a business. So I took that route and started teaching classes on my own, and I got a Facebook page going. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So I've got a Facebook page. I tried doing blogs. I got a website, and I started getting an email list and putting emails out. And then at one point, I was like hardly ever putting emails out. But after I started doing the writing shotgun stuff, I crank out emails twice a month. I've got an episode of Writing Shotgun. I've got some other relevant news stories. Might have to do with the person that I interviewed, and then I put a list of classes. So, yeah, it's just a lot of work. And it feels like, to me, when I have a class of 4 or 5 people, and, I go home with basically a half a week's pay, right. Like, man, this is totally worth it. This is awesome. You feel good about yourself. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So, advice you have for people that, you kind of came from a non-firearms life, I guess you would say, and you transitioned. What kind of advice would you have for new shooters that are thinking about it, but maybe they're not surrounded by gun people?
I'm at the point now where I'm just like, you know what? Just if you want to go shooting, go shooting. Like, I don't want to impress anyone. If you don't like me, cool. I'm not out to win your approval. I don't want to tell you how to live, and I don't want you to tell me how to live. And even though I'm a registered Republican, I feel much more libertarian in that, hey man, like, let everybody do what they want to do. If they're not breaking the law, cool, rock on. I'm not going to bother you if you're not breaking the law. I don't want you to bother me. I'm not breaking the law. You go about your business, I go about my business, and kind of let things go and let people be. So if you've got some people that aren't into it, you'll probably find out, if you bring it up with somebody, you'll probably find out that they're either a closet gun owner or they want to do it also.
Okay.
And what I used to do before I started teaching people is I contacted my buddies in the neighborhood, and I'm like, hey man, you want to go out on Sunday afternoon and get away from the wife and kids? I got something pretty fun to do. Oh cool, what is it? We're going to go watch football and drink a couple beers? I'm like, no, this is cool. And I take them out and I'm like, hey, here's the gun safety rules. The reason I'm teaching these is because I don't want you to shoot me. Teach them the gun safety rules, and then the next thing I know, they're asking where to get a license and how to get up and going and doing all that sort of stuff. So,
Nice.
yeah, talk to somebody. Talk to someone that might be into it, or that you think might be into it, because if you're interested and you don't know how to get started, there's probably someone else that is also interested and doesn't know how to get started, and they probably don't want to tell anyone either.
And, and depending where you are in the country, half the people are gun owners. So if you're not one, your neighbor probably is.
Probably is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So what else? You do the gungrams, you have riding shotgun with Charlie. Is DC10 tomorrow?
DC10 is tomorrow.
Okay.
That is going to be a lot of fun. The reason we're able to connect is because I'm heading down for that. I actually tried to weasel my way into a speaking spot, but I did not get one, which is cool.
Yeah.
But some of the podcasts that are out there, Cheryl Todd's going to be there, and she's going to be speaking. Amanda Suffolk's going to be there. She's going to be speaking. Antonia Akavar is going to be there. Mark Robinson, he's the guy from the Carolinas that spoke out back in April. He's going to be speaking.
Yeah. Right.
Dick Heller's going to be speaking. Tyler from the Second Amendment Institute is going to be speaking. Ted Cruz is going to be there. He's going to be speaking too. So it's going to be really cool. I remember, I don't know if you remember, I was new to gun ownership. I was only into it for a few years when the Heller incident happened. And I remember taking my kids shooting, getting some pictures of them and saying, hey, this is how, the Supreme Court came out in favor of Dick Heller, and this is how the Cooks celebrate. I got a picture of my kids were 5 and 7 at the time, holding up pictures of targets. And I remember where I was when I found out that this decision went down. So I'm happy to be at this and happy to be a part of this. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, but really, really amazing that it's been 10 years since that decision. And as groundbreaking and amazing a decision as it was, it's hard to believe that we're still living under such oppressive gun laws in our respective states.
Yeah, absolutely. I just found out. I saw some article yesterday, I think it was, that said that Massachusetts is the most liberal of liberal states.
Oh, wow.
I said, well, if you're going to be bad, be the worst.
Right, yes, yeah. And so, I mean, around here, people are like, move to PA. How far are you from New Hampshire?
It probably takes a little over an hour. The town I live in is on the Connecticut border, so
Gotcha.
It takes a little over an hour to get there. I actually teach classes at a place up in Manchester, New Hampshire.
Oh,
I
okay.
teach the Utah class up there.
Nice.
So he's a little further up, New Hampshire, but it's this is the thing, and Anthony Calandra talks about this a lot too. We're eventually going to run out of places to go to.
Right.
So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to put up the good fight. I want, just like you, I want the anti-gun folks to see that gun owners we're not crazy, we're not lunatics, we're not, bib overall, long beard wearing, rednecks. I mean, and I hate to say that that's what the stereotype is, but we're not that.
Right.
We're regular people. And I tell people, I say this when I teach class too. I say, listen, here's the deal. I carry knives and guns as tools to be able to protect me and my kids, and that's it. And if you don't want to do that, that's cool. I'm not going to make you do it. And if you don't want to do it, rock on. But I don't want you to tell me how I cannot protect my kids, because my kids are my responsibility, and I have to be responsible for them. And that was a big thing for me. And I'm like, if somebody beats the crap out of you in the parking lot after class, I'll pull out my phone and try to get some good video and get the license plate and call the police for you. I said, because I'm not going to shoot someone for you. You're going to take me to the little chain restaurant, the Applebee's, and they buy me a $12 steak. I'm getting arrested. I'm going to jail. My name's in the paper. My kids, people are going to look at my kids differently because their dad's a vigilante, and all of a sudden he thinks he's, the Punisher or something.
Right.
I tell people, I said, I'm glad you guys are taking class. This is great. I appreciate it. I'm not doing that for you guys. you should have taken my class 6 months ago.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
So that's my scoop.
So I always ask people if there are
books.
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. So the book, I like reading the old books. There's a lot of great new books that are out there on self-defense and all that cool stuff. I like reading the old books. So the book, I tried finding the title, and I can't remember it. I can't remember it exactly, but it's like the complete method for modern pistol craft, I think is the title. It's by Jeff Cooper.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the stuff is dated. The pictures are dated. The stance that they use in their shooting is dated. Not that the Weaver stance is dated, but a lot of stuff in there is dated. But what I really like about that book is that Jeff Cooper talks about a way to make you a better shooter through dry firing every day. He's like, go to the, dry fire 6 days a week, go to the range for an hour on the weekend, and dry fire. And I thought that was really cool. And I actually photocopied that and, I did the whole, if you follow his method, he'll tell you that in 6 months you'll be a better shooter. But since I was smarter than Jeff Cooper, I knew I could do it in less than 6 months.
Yep.
So I didn't follow his program. And then 6 years later, I'm like, so what was that 6 month method that I should have done years ago?
Yep. All right. Nice. All right. So we'll link that. Okay.
I actually, it's the only way you can find it now is used, and I actually found it in one of my local town's libraries. And this is really bad. I thought about stealing it, but I didn't.
Oh,
I didn't.
okay.
I found one online. I think someone else did, because I went to go look for it later, and it's not in the library system. But I did find out an old hard copy of the book, and I think that book's great by Jeff Cooper. I think he's the man.
Awesome. Cool. And where can people find you?
You can find me on the Facebook if you look for Riding Shotgun with Charlie. I have all the Riding Shotgun interviews there. I have the Riding Shotgun. I take the audio and I put it out as a podcast, so you can find that on iTunes and on Google Play. The Gungram stuff, I have a different YouTube channel for the Gungrams. Honestly, if you just look up GUNGRAM, you'll find all sorts of stuff. Sometimes late at night, I'll Google my name and Gungram and see what comes up. And I found articles on Gungrams in Spain, England, Germany, Italy, and China.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Awesome.
I always wanted to be famous. I didn't. This isn't quite what I thought.
Right.
To get run over. Yep. So that's how people can find me. If you want to find my shooting instruction stuff, I call that personal shooting instruction. I've got a Facebook page and a website for that as well. But the Riding Shotgun stuff is taken off, and I know that there's another number of other people that are instructors that are just as qualified as I am. But Riding Shotgun, I think is what I'm going to keep focusing my energy on.
Great.
Cool, man.
Charlie, thank you for being on the show.
James, thank you for having me, man. This has been a pleasure. And obviously, when I get links, I'll put it up and share it with all my peeps.
Great.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Out of Order Gun Rights Podcast. Please head over to the show notes page, outoforderjameskalita.com/Charlie, and we'll see you next time.